Hi everyone, welcome back to the Helen Olivia virtual workshops. My name is Lindsay and I am going to be leading you in our Christmas Centerpiece class today. So we've got a lot of materials for this class. It's going to be a really beautiful centerpiece arrangement. I've got my festive sweater on, so we are ready to go. So I'm just going to talk you through all of your materials and then we can go ahead and get started since we've got a lot we're working with. So first things first is you've got your bag of supplies that you got delivered to you or you came and picked up from our shop. And in your bag you have our vase. This is our birch long and low vase and we are going to be putting our floral foam into here to design into. So that's your vase. This is your floral foam. If you've never designed with floral foam, I'll talk you through some tips and tricks for that. The other things that are in your bag are your pine cones and your cymbidium orchids. We are going to use all of these things later. Your cymbidium orchids are in their own water source, so you don't have to worry about doing anything with those. You just leave them in those water tubes. We also have an extra hyacinth stake, just in case you want to pop some fresh fruit into your arrangement on like Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, just to have a nice little fresh touch. The other thing that you need is a water source. I've got a Percona or a bucket next to me, halfway filled with water, so I can soak my floral foam. So if you're not already, get over near your sink or fill up a big bucket or a large mixing bowl, and we're gonna soak this foam. The other thing you need per usual is your floral tools. So I've got my floral clippers and my floral knife with me today. One or the other should be okay. If anything, clippers would be better because you may not be able to cut some of the magnolia or the greenery with a knife. So if you don't have either of these, a really good sharp pair of kitchen scissors will be okay. And if you want to use a knife, a paring knife as well. Just nothing with a serrated edge because you never want to damage the stems. And as we go, I'm going to try to repeat it, but if I keep forgetting, we are always making sharp angled cuts on all of our stems. We want those sharp angles and we want as much surface area as possible for the flowers to drink through. So just keep that in mind as we go, and I will try to repeat that. The other thing that we have is our big bundles of greenery. So we've got a bunch of cedar that we're going to be using. And we've also got a bunch of this beautiful magnolia tips. So those things we're gonna be using as well. So it's a lot that's gonna go into this guy, but it's gonna make for a beautiful centerpiece for your holiday celebration. So I'm gonna talk us through everything that we've got in our buckets, and you will have a recipe sheet in your bag as well that has a list of all your ingredients so you can follow along. So let's go ahead and start by soaking our foam in water. Floral foam only has a limited source of water, a limited amount of water that it can hold. So you want to let this soak really slowly and let it take its time soaking up the water. You never want to force floral foam down into water because it will create air pockets and it won't have the maximum amount of water that you want it to have. So when you are soaking floral foam, you want to drop it into water. You do not want to press it down into water. So you're going to lightly drop that in. And this piece will probably have to trim, but I prefer to cut it when it's wet. It doesn't make as much of a nails on a chalkboard sound. So we're going to drop this second piece in as well, and then get a clean surface, a cutting board or something. Not one that you would serve anything off of. But while that soaks, let's go ahead and get our greenery unbound. So let's cut these rubber bands and get ourselves situated. So we've got all of our magnolia, and then I'm going to cut our cedar apart as well, just so you have kind of a better handle on what you are working with. A lot of greenery. Okay. Now that you can check on your foam and see how it's doing, mine's almost done soaking. But again, never press it down. Just let it slowly absorb, and you'll see that it's getting darker as it absorbs. And then we're gonna place the large piece into our vase, and then we'll place the other piece. So we've got our first piece that's fully soaked, and we're gonna place that into our vase. It's okay to have some room around, and it's actually preferred because when you're designing in foam, it's hard to tell how much water is still left in the foam. But if you have room around the edges, you can always tell when you need to add water. So when there's no standing water around the edges of the foam, you should probably top it off with a little more fresh water. Then we've got our other half piece, and with this vase, it's got kind of a sharp edge, so you can actually just cut it by pressing down and it'll slice it to size. But if that isn't gonna work for you and you don't wanna press too hard where you're pressing water out of it, so the other thing you can do is just measure it. So say you're using this, you're gonna measure it, and then wherever there's any overhang, you can just cut, and then you would insert that into your foam. Since I've already sliced it with the side of the vase, I am ready to go here. The next thing, I'm gonna actually dip mine because I don't have a running faucet next to me, but you want to make sure that there is as much water in your vase as you can get. There should be standing water around your foam, so make sure that there is before we move on. The first thing that we're gonna grab once your foam is all wet and in your vase is our mini green hydrangea. So we're gonna use mini green hydrangea to kind of, I think we've got 5 mini green, yeah, 5 mini green. So we are gonna disperse this throughout your vase. So I'm gonna go 1 on each end, 1 on each side, a little angled, and then 1 up top. So let's start with the ones on the end. With your hydrangea, you're gonna remove that plastic. You're going to pull off any of the low-lying leaves. So any leaves that are falling below this top part that's hugging the blooms, you wanna take off. Make a sharp angled cut, and you can do that with clippers or a knife. And again, you want as much surface area as possible for the stems to drink from. With foam, you want to design with the stems going into it as low as you can possibly get them. If they're too close to the top, or you're sticking things very shallowly in here, they are gonna end up not in water, because the first thing the foam is gonna do is drink from the bottom, and the top will become the first part that gets dry. So we're always gonna angle things down and into our foam, and you want those stems about as long or as tall as the vase. And I'm gonna move my bucket so you can see better. There we go. So we're gonna start with our 2 on the ends. We're gonna angle those in, and we're gonna let this really hug the side of the vase. Take our second one, same thing, remove these leaves, and then we're gonna make a sharp angled cut. Again, stem is about as tall as the vase, and then we are angling that down and in towards the center. So everything is going to go in at angles all around. And when mini green hydrangea has this natural curve a lot of the times, and when it's got the natural curve, you kind of want to let it naturally do that on your edge of the vase. So you never want to have it so it's flipped and then it's facing upward. So when it's curving down like that, let that be the part that sits on your vase. So we're going to put in our third mini green, and I'm gonna put it on one side, almost centrally, but a little off center, and let that rest on the vase. So these are really hugging your vase. And then we've got number 4, which same thing, remove those leaves, make that sharp angled cut, And then since this one's a little off to the side, I'm gonna do this one a little bit off to that side. Nestle that there. So we've got 4, and then we're gonna take our 5th and we're gonna go right up in the center. And since this one's got quite the curve, I'm actually gonna angle it in more so it faces a little more straight. And the nice thing with foam that you can't really do with water is that you can manipulate the way that things face in foam a lot more. So since this is super, super curved downward, if I were to stick it in straight up and down, it just curves to the left. But if I were to angle it at a kind of a deep angle, it's more straight up and down. So basically I want to angle this in, and this is just going to give us a guideline for our height. You can do things a little bit taller if you want, but we like to keep these quite low, as they are called long and lows. So that's what I'm going to do. The next thing we're going to do is put our magnolia in. So with magnolia, it's got these really cool 2 contrasting textures, the shiny green, and then on the other side we've got this like soft matte, kind of suede-like texture to the magnolia's brown side. For this greenery, it survives quite well in foam because it is hardy. Another thing that you should note is that you can put single leaves of magnolia into foam and they will survive as well. We may not have to use that because we do have a ton of magnolia. So let's start by placing magnolia in the corners. So right in the corner, I'm gonna stick my first piece of magnolia tips. And we don't have to have them very long. And you can also split these pieces into multiple little offshoots. And then pull off any of the leaves that are too low. I like to have very uniform pieces when I'm placing magnolia in. So for example, this piece, I like all of this, but any of the part that's below that, I'm gonna yank off. And then we're gonna do the third corner. So really just placing this in the corners because I want it to spray out, and this will build the size. And then we're gonna have a few other pieces throughout. And notice how I'm angling everything in towards the center. You don't want to stick your magnolia straight up and down. Straight up and down. It just doesn't look as natural. So angle that in and really manipulate the shape of the arrangement. So I'm just gonna fill in and pop some pieces all around. Another thing that you can do is a really beautiful place card for Christmas is using magnolia leaves. I've done it before. Rachel, the owner of Helen Olivia, has done it as well for holidays. You can take a white paint marker and do people's names on the magnolia, and it looks super, super pretty, especially for Christmas. So if you have any little pretty leaves that you pulled off and can't use in the arrangement, save those and you can do little place cards for your guests. And you'll really impress them. So just pop all the magnolia in, and anything that you don't use, I pretty much use everything. So you can save it for another use. And set those aside. And now we're gonna grab our cedar. So our cedar is this gorgeous drapey green. We absolutely love this here. It just creates a really pretty cascading look, and it's a lot softer than the other Christmas greenery that you see. So for this, we're gonna split this up into a bunch of pieces, and we're gonna utilize it multiple places throughout this arrangement. So for cedar, I tend to like to just use the tips. It can feel wasteful at times, but we'll try to get as much of this out of here as we can. So I'm gonna split some stems as we go. So for anything that has this pretty pointed part, that I definitely want to use. And so I'll cut that off. And then for something like this, you can kind of fake it till you make it and shape it yourself and make that look like a prettier piece than it may have before, because when it falls, it's gonna sit and still drape really nicely. So we're just gonna do that with all of the cedar pieces and just keep cutting all the different offshoots and use them as many ways as possible. So just take your large piece of cedar and then you're gonna cut off all of the little pieces. And with foam, you can get away with shorter stems, and especially in a long and low vase, you don't need your stems as long as you would in a normal vase. So sometimes even little guys like this can still be used, because see how that stem will go quite far into the foam. So that's really nice for cedar, because you don't have a lot of waste if you can utilize it in a bunch of different places. So we're gonna keep doing that, and I like to just trim it all at once and just get like a really nice pile going, and then we can pop it all into our arrangement. So I've got my collection already, and then we've still got more pieces to go. If you feel overwhelmed by the amount of the cedar and you don't feel like you're gonna wanna use it all, you can totally use this as a pretty napkin garnish. So any little tiny pieces that you aren't able to use in your arrangement, like this, can be a little napkin garnish on everyone's plate, and it looks super pretty and festive. And another thing you can do is, if you end up with larger pieces, you can just put this on your table and put it out from either side of your centerpiece, and it'll create a really beautiful table scape. So that's a couple ways you can use it without wasting. You'll definitely find a place for this. So we've got all of our little guys in a collection. Okay. Then I've got one more piece that I'm gonna cut, and the rest I'll assess if I need, but I might be pretty good. Okay, so now that I've got a big pile of smaller pieces, we're gonna start placing those throughout the vase. So we really just wanna mix in, and you're stripping off any of the grains, because the stem that goes into the foam needs to be completely clear of leaves. And the cedar is a great way to blow out the shape of the arrangement, so don't be afraid to leave it longer on the sides. It looks really, really nice once it's in there and it kind of drapes out beautifully. So let's start by doing that with a couple pieces on either end. And then, I'm stripping these leaves off as I add. Every single time you're cleaning that stem, you do not want to place anything with leaves on the stem into foam, because it'll just start shredding your foam and it just makes a mess. So cleaned stems. And I'm gonna spin this around so you can see this side. And we've got lots to add, so let's just keep placing. And we're gonna nestle down low near the mini green as well. Stripping those stems nice and low. cedar and just designing in foam in general, it's a lot more, you're kind of threading the greenery into the foam. So just be patient with yourself if you're fighting any stems. So we just want a mix of cedar and magnolia everywhere. And I really just love this kind of sprayed out look that the cedar gives. Oops. So almost done. And make sure that this is the time that we're kind of covering any of the foam that's around the edge close to the base here. So make sure we're disguising the foam really well. And we like to use foam for these kinds of things just because when they transport a lot better. Your stems don't move around. When you get things that are sent out from us, you know, the whole arrangement hasn't shifted. So it works well. Okay. So now that I've placed all the cedar, I am going to grab our Lacutho, and Lacutho. I was like, why did I say that wrong? This is really gorgeous red tinted. This is something we're just gonna spread out in there as well. It's just a different, interesting texture. And perfect red tone for Christmas. So we've got 3 pieces. So I'm just giving that a nice cut, cleaning off any of those leaves and then placing in your vase. So I've got one on this end, one on this end. I'm gonna go one kind of centrally, just so there's a little touch of it in 3 places, like that. Then we're gonna place our kale. So our kale, now we're gonna rock and roll because as soon as you've got all your greenery in, you're halfway there. With Christmas greenery and greening up vases during the holidays, it just takes so much longer because things like cedar are so small. So with our kale, we're gonna make sharp cuts. We're going to remove any of the sad, low leaves, and then we're gonna leave that guy kind of soft and fluffy up top. You can reflex it, but this particular kale doesn't really have that beautiful white center, so I like to leave it tighter, just because when you reflex it, it just looks more flat, kind of. You can give it like a little fluff and then place it. So I'm gonna go ahead and place one, and how you want to think about using your kale is kind of in between your mini green. And I'm going to place our first guy here. And we're doing everything in at angles. I'm going to place my second one over on this side facing me. And also, depending on your table size, you can really blow this out longer if you need to. If you've got a really long table, you can also go a little wider. If you've got kind of a wider table or a square or something like that, or you want it for like your kitchen island, you can go a little wider. So just think of that when you're placing your kale and all your other flowers. So when I say you can really spray it out longer, you can go quite long with your cedar if you want to. I'm gonna leave this kind of modest in size, adding these last 2 pieces of cedar in. And make sure you're not poking the greenery through the mini green. You want to make sure you're going around it. So we've got 2 kale in, and we're going to do a third over here. there. And then I'm placing my fourth, removing any of the yucky leaves, giving it a little fluff, but not a full-on reflex. We just want to fluff it back to life after being transported. And then we'll place our fourth. And you want to just think about having them at differing heights. You don't want them too close together. You want everything to look very, very natural. So it should be intentional where you're placing things, but it should look unintentional. Now that those are in, we can grab our, what do we want to do next? We have, I think we're going to place, actually let's do our roses. So we're going to go ahead and clean all of our roses. And by cleaning your roses, that means you're going to remove any of those leaves on the stem, and you're going to pull off any damaged guard petals. Guard petals protect the center of the rose, but when you remove them, it doesn't damage the integrity of the rose at all. It actually helps it open up more beautifully and prevent any rot from happening. Once you remove those damaged petals, the rot won't kind of like spread if there's any kind of yuckiness. But do that for every single rose, and then we're going to place these. So you can pull off as few or as many as you would like. You can also blow on the center of the roses to spread them out a little bit or blow them more open. Since I'm doing this today and we've got a few days until Christmas, I'm gonna leave them tight and I'm not gonna blow on the center of them just because they've got a few days. They're definitely gonna open up more and I don't want them to open too prematurely. So, but if you like a more blown open rose, then totally fine to do that as well. Now that we've cleaned, and also those are our freedoms, and our freedoms are our red variety that we're using, and the hot spots are the hot pink that we're using. And same thing goes for the hot spots. We are going to pull off any damaged petals and remove any of those leaves. Be careful of any thorns. I don't think there are many on here, but just in case. And then now that those are all cleaned, let's go ahead and clean our spray roses as well since we're in the groove. Spray roses, you do the exact same thing as roses, just times however many little buds you have, or blooms. So you're gonna pull off all of the little leaves. You can trim any of the little offshoots to make it a little more smooth. And then you're gonna pull off the guard petals, anything that's damaged on every single bloom on the stem. So it's just a little more tedious because there are multiple blooms here. So I'm gonna pull those off. Anything super close to the top is fine to stay, but anything down here you want to clear off. And then these actually are in pretty good shape. Pull those off. And then once we've done that for this one, we've got our third, and we'll grab that and we will get that cleaned up, and then we'll put our roses in our vase. And these are just super delicate, so be careful when you're doing this. And the last one here. Now all the dirty work is done. And if you like the look, or you don't mind the look of the guard petals on the spray roses, that's totally fine to leave them. It's just personal preference. I just think they look nicer, a little cleaned up, but up to you. So now let's place our roses all throughout. With our roses, we like to kind of group them. We've got, I think, 11 roses, so 8 freedoms, and we've got 3 hot spots, and we are gonna place those throughout. Since we've only got 3 of the hot pink, and we really wanna get that hot pink kind of everywhere, let's just think about our 3 pockets where we're gonna place the hot pink. So we're gonna go hot pink here, we're gonna go hot pink maybe over here and then maybe over here. So just think about that as you're planning where you're gonna put things. So let's start with our red ones though, since we've got more of them. And we'll start with kind of little groupings or duos. So right away, I've got a place where I want my roses, and that is right here. With your roses, you want to make sure that they are sticking out a little farther than your mini green, because your mini green is not the star, the roses are. So place one, and we also want to always think about varying the lengths of the stems. Shorter stems mean they're going to be further in, longer stems mean they're going to be sticking out a little farther. You want them to be varied because it just creates a little more visual interest. So since I've got one in already, and then I'm going to place, it's hard to do this reaching over the table, but I just want to give you an idea of where or how you would stagger them. Okay, so that's number two. And we also like to stagger them diagonally, so they're never directly on top or directly beside each other. Even though it is snowman season, we don't like to stack them right on top because it looks like a snowman, and then side by side it just looks like eyeballs. The other thing that you can notice is how the lengths of the stems, I've left longer a little bit for this one, shorter a little for that one, and it just differentiates where the rose sticks out. Again, it's just helping to make a more natural look than a really, really rounded, tight pave, which is also beautiful, but just not what this style of design is calling for. So we're gonna do the same thing on the opposite side. So since I've gone here, I'm gonna go over here and do that on the opposite side with two reds. So again, we're angling everything in. We want to make sure that we've got all sides covered. Make sure you're stepping back and looking at things as you're placing your roses. So then I'm gonna place, so I've got 4 in, that's 5. Then we're gonna go up a little higher so you can see it from the top, but that's still kind of a pair. And then I'll do my last pair since I've got 2, 2, 2. Last pair is gonna go down here at the end. So make that sharp angled cut for your roses, and then you're gonna pierce it into the foam and get it placed. And again, I've left this kind of up top, so it's really giving that rounded look. And then this one on the side is sitting quite low, so you get that view from the side. So make sure you're consistently turning this around and looking at it at all angles. Then we've got our hot spots to mix in. So we're gonna generally create groupings, but they're not gonna be tight together. So since I've got 1, 2 here, I'm gonna do a pink on the end there. So that kind of visually creates a trio, though they're literally not sitting on top of each other. So that's our first hot spot. Then I think I want one, I definitely want one somewhere, since you see a hint of pink there, I can either go, okay, I'm gonna go here for one. See how we visually have a trio, hot pink right there. And then for the third, I'm going to place it on the other side. So we have a trio. So just, it's easier to look at it as trios. It doesn't have to be exactly that. If you feel like you've got a gaping hole and you need something, definitely go ahead and put a rose there. But it's nice to just think of groupings so you kind of have an idea of generally where to place things or what will end up looking good. So then we're gonna add our sprays in. Our sprays, we can just pop throughout, and they do not have to be paired with anything. I just like to disperse these well so everywhere gets a little touch of red from those guys. And there. Another thing I forgot to mention is that you totally can reflex roses if you would like. Reflexing roses is a really cool way to create impact with your flowers. And when you're reflexing a rose, that means flipping the petals backwards. You would grab gently the top of the petal, pull it a little bit back, and then with your thumb, you press gently forward to flip the petal over, and that is reflexed. With a reflexed rose, they don't necessarily last quite as long, but they are extremely beautiful. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and include and reflex 2 of mine just because I think creates kind of a cool impact. So I'm gonna pull another one out and reflex that as well. And these freedoms will reflex really, really beautifully. So definitely try it if you want. And if it's not your cup of tea, then totally fine to leave them as is, but I thought I might as well show you something that you can do to make it look a little different or new. And you can do 1 layer, you can do a few layers. For this, I've done a couple layers. And then once you're placing it back in the foam, just give it a fresh cut always. And there is your other guy. So it just looks kind of cool and fun. Okay, now that I did 2, I want to do 3, so. Again, you do not have to do this at all, but you can. It just looks cool, so. So now that those are placed, also it makes it so they take up a little more space. We don't have a ton of flowers in this, so that is a nice little touch. Then we're gonna grab our leucadendron cones, which are these little guys, and I think it's possible I had 3, but we might have just had 2. These are just a little cool textural element. So, and they're also a lighter color, so anywhere you feel like you need a little contrasting lightness, just pop those in. So I've got 1 there, and I've got 1 here. Oh, there's my 3rd. And then I've got another. So again, I'm stripping any of those leaves off. Do not put anything into the foam that still has leaves on it. And then placing those in the foam securely. Make sure everything is secure in the foam. Then we're gonna grab for our thistle. Our thistle, I absolutely love this white thistle for Christmas. I think it's a really cool textural element. And with this, I want it to, again, we're using this vase as kind of a measuring tool. If this middle guy bothers you because it's lower than the other pieces, you can totally cut the middle guy off. If not, it's totally fine to leave. I'm gonna leave it on because it creates kind of different levels. Sharp angled cut, and then we're placing our thistle around. And remember to take a look at everything from different angles, see where you might need something. So since I've got thistle here and thistle here, I kind of want 1 low near this pink rose for a cool little pop of texture. And then we're gonna pop in our hypericum berries. And this is your red hypericum. And we are using these as another fun textural element that is Christmas colored. So anywhere that you have a little gap, a little hole that you need to fill, just pop that hypericum in. And I've got kind of a void of color right here. So I popped that one there, and then I've got the last one, and I'm going to place it at the end over here. Then we are going to place pine cones, and pine cones are great, again, for gap filling. Any of these that are sitting right at the top are totally fine not, and also these pine cones don't need to be in the foam, so they're fine not being in the foam. Just make sure they're secure, tucked between flowers or wherever you put them. So I've got one up here because I had a little gap. I'm gonna stick one low over there. Whoops, one higher up here. And they just give that really pretty, natural, and very Christmassy, rustic element. There. And there. And I actually have a little hole that I want to fill with some cedar, so bear with me while I do that up top. And I'm gonna move this. Again, sharp cut for any piece that you pull out and have to rework into the arrangement. I would always just make a sharp cut. So that is pretty much it. The only other thing that we have to add in are cymbidiums. So our cymbidiums are already in water tubes. Another thing that you can reflex are these cymbidiums, and you can do it very gently by pressing and flipping the petals. These do tear very easily, so if you're too nervous to do that, then definitely just leave it at it as is. And even when it's cupped like that, it looks really beautiful in the arrangement. And then we're gonna split these up. So I've put one here, which looks really beautiful. And then I'm gonna do one facing the other side. And I don't even need to reflex it because it's already a bigger bloom. So there. And now that we've done all of that, that's our last floral element. And then I'll talk to you guys about how you can incorporate fruit. So I wouldn't necessarily pick clementines for this, but this is what we had in the shop, so that's what I'm working with. But you could do pops of orange if you were doing that on your tablescape. But if you wanted to put in apples or pears, like green apples, red apples, all kinds of apples, or any pears would look really, really pretty for this for Christmas. But for fruit, you don't want it to be around the flowers for too long because the gases that the fruit emits causes flowers to die more quickly. So if you want to include fresh fruit, I would suggest waiting until, you know, Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, whenever you're entertaining. And then what you're gonna do is use this hyacinth stake that we've given you. You're gonna cut it in half, and then you can use it for 2 pieces of fruit. So I will give you an example by showing you the clementine. With a clementine or a citrus fruit, it'll skewer really, really easily. So you're just gonna stick it right up in the bottom, and then you're going to place these in your arrangement, and it just creates a really fun, fresh touch that looks really homey. And also it smells delightful, especially if you're using citrus. So I've got one there, and then I might put one over here. So that's just an example of how you can incorporate that on the last day. But again, I would do that like Christmas morning or Christmas Eve night, whenever you need your centerpiece. But definitely use that hyacinth stake if you've got any little fruits around for that extra special touch. But that's it for the class. This is our Christmas centerpiece. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that you check out all the new workshops that are now listed on our website. We've got some more in person coming up, and we also have virtual as well. And we really appreciate all of your business for the workshops this year. It's been a great year for workshops for us, and we hope you enjoy them as much as we do. And we hope you have a very, very happy holidays and a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year. Thank you.